So Katerina, our other panelists are late.
Online. 2 people online.
2 people online. Who
Yeah.
is online?
Hi, I'm online. Hadzhieva.
80. Okay. Who else is online?
So we have and Dina on Zoom. Dina, we already have you. Nice. Going on with it.
Did you say?
She asked to start and she will join during the panel.
Okay. All right. So I'm Jay Townsend. I get to moderate this and just listen. So, as was stated, we're going to start with global and then get into some of domestic politics here. That's it. Is that better?
Oh, great.
Okay. So I'll just say at the outset, no matter how hard it seems that we try to stay out of things, there's always a foreign country or somebody somewhere that seems to want to draw the United States into a conflict halfway around the world. So perhaps we'll shed some light on this today. Stephen, I'm going to introduce you. Stephen is okay. Stephen is an expert on Sino-Russian relationships, particularly and especially Russia. Russia, despite the size of its economy, seems to be very adept at sticking its nose into conflicts that somehow involve the United States. So I'm going to ask that we address that today because the whole dynamic of what Russia is up to and how they draw Asian countries into their sphere of influence is of interest to the United States. Now, Eli, are you there?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Eli is expert on all things European. And Eli, I hope we'll get into some discussion where you can kind of offer us some commentary on the polarization in Europe and whether it's preceding what's going to happen here or how you think it will play out there, and perhaps even comment a little bit on what it is that's driving the polarization. Because sometimes it seems that things happen in Europe before they happen here. Peter, where is Peter? Okay. All right. And Dina is going to join us later. Okay. So, Stephen, why don't you start this off and just give us a little perspective on what you think is going on in the part of the world that is your expertise and how it affects both global politics and perhaps the election that we're going to have here next year.
Thank you, Jay. That's pretty much what Katerina asked me to talk about anyway. So I'll try to get all that in. She gave me 5 to 7 minutes, but I'll try to do that also. All right, to make it as simple as possible for the audience here and virtually, both Russia and China believe that they are God-given, or if you're a communist, history foreordained, that you are a great empire with the right to intervene in all global issues, and that this must be recognized. And if you will not be recognized as such, then you're going to destroy the furniture in the room that you're all living in. Now, that's a very simplistic analogy, but it's not untrue. Both Russia and China are states with an imperial mindset and legacy. It's very clear that for Putin, what you need to do is read his speeches, and for Russian public opinion, Russia must be an empire. What they call the Hadzhieva, great power, but that means that they have a global right to intervene in world problems. This is not something that Putin invented. This goes back centuries in Russian thinking, and it is therefore a challenge to any world order that doesn't is an exemplar and promoter, both by default, of democracy worldwide, even when we don't behave particularly democratically. We are therefore a standing threat to Russia and to China. To give you a quick example, 2006, Defense Minister Sergei Ivanov writes in the Wall Street Journal that the greatest threat to Russia is a constitutional upheaval, not war. In other words, the end of the dictatorship. Because Putin has restored the classic Russian patrimonial autocracy. I don't have time to define that for you, but that's in the literature on Russian history. You can find it. But that's really the kind of worldview we're looking at. Now, specifically, they are challenging democracy and U.S. interests, which are not always quite the same thing, on a global scale. That doesn't mean that dialogue is impossible. We saw dialogue with China yesterday, and today they're having the actual APEC meetings in San Francisco, where both sides and all the other members, including Russia, are discussing issues of substantial importance. However, I'm giving a paper on this in 2 weeks, actually, in Philadelphia. The Russo-American dialogue is frozen. They will not talk to us about arms control or about anything else. They demand that we change our policies as a precondition for talks. They will not renounce anything they've accomplished in Ukraine, like the annexation of 4 provinces. And therefore, although there is a dialogue, you don't hear about it because what both sides want is incompatible with each other. This has profound human consequences. We have 3 people who are being held hostage in Russia as well. And this goes on, and nothing seems to be affected. But I want to talk also about how this is going to affect our election. Let me begin here with a quote from Walter Lippmann, who, as you know, is one of the great, not only a great journalist and commentator, but one of the great American political thinkers in modern times. And he wrote during World War II in 1943, quote, "Our experience since the foundation of the Republic has shown that domestic division over foreign relations is the outward and visible consequence and not the cause of an insolvent foreign policy." Now, everyone in this room and everybody on Zoom knows that American politics are polarized. The evidence is overwhelming. But that is not the cause of foreign policy division. It is rather the result of policies that failed, particularly Iraq and Afghanistan. Therefore, that failure was bipartisan. But of course, neither side is going to admit that, because that would mean accepting blame and responsibility, even though both sides are implicated in this. And part of this game is that nobody accepts responsibility for anything these days, which is also part of the problem of polarization. However, the 2024 election, which is the elephant in the room now, if you like, is going to turn not only on domestic policy, but on the perception of the electorate as to what our foreign policy is accomplishing or not accomplishing. And this gets to issues that you may not think of, because there's, for example, there's a lot of public discussion now. If President Biden simply has the stamina to carry on for 4 years, and much of that is connected to foreign policy. I was just telling Jay before this that he seemed to have done pretty well this weekend, spending 4 hours in a summit with Xi Jinping, and that I think should dispel people's fears about this, but nevertheless, the criticism is going to continue. So, the issue of foreign policy impact on elections is not, however, only confined to the United States. In Poland, Jaroslaw Kaczynski, having lost an election, charged that the Polish election was swayed by foreign influence and propaganda, which means primarily American and German. So you see the influence of foreign policy or foreign actors right away. Putin has launched such campaigns in 2016, 2018, 20, and 22. Probably is preparing for one next year. Here, you know that matter of public record. He's going to try to influence the election, just as he wanted to get rid of Hillary Clinton. And this debate as to whether he actually, it was his action, so Russian actions that did so. There's no doubt who believes that he was successful to a considerable degree and has been trying ever since to do that. And of course, they're doing the same all over Europe. If you look at European elections as well. The global upsurge of anti-Semitism has come about as a result of Hamas's pogrom, for want of a better word, on October 7th, is also an example of foreign influence in America. One example of how you can prove this. Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, Saturday. That night, 34 campus organizations at Harvard all came out with a statement saying this. Now, all of you who are familiar with American colleges know that to get an organization to come out with a resolution in one day is next to impossible. They get 34 meetings, prior coordination, financing, that's clearly. And if you look at the Area Defamation League report on this, on 2023 is in preparation, they talk about funding of organizations by Iran, Arab countries, dark money, which is untraceable, and so on. So we have foreign influence coming into America to target an ethnic religious group, as well as to influence American policy. China, as we know, is conducting global influence operations, not just America, but influence operations here are being exposed quite regularly that China is doing. We see in New York City, the mayor now is under suspicion. Senator Menendez has been indicted for taking foreign money. And these are not just American examples. That just was revealed today. The leading expert on Putin in Germany took 600,000 pounds to write a biography of Putin from Russian oligarchs. I can assure you that he's doing a lot better than I ever did in this profession. But that's another example of the globalization of influence operations. This is not just uniquely an American issue. But they all show the influence of foreign actors and actors who have a stake in the outcome, trying to influence the United States and other governments. Now, if we look at the election campaign at the beginning now, Biden's handling of the three current crises, China, the war in the Middle East, and the war in Ukraine, will influence perceptions of his leadership capability and of the success of his foreign policies. That's clear. So, for example, I fear that we haven't done enough for Ukraine. We need to do much more. Unfortunately, the Republican Party, or at least the majority of it, doesn't seem to want to do anything, which is a guarantee that Russia wins if it's successful. And I can say that with 100% confidence. Secretary Austin said so as well, and so does Zelensky, and I think they know more about this than I do. If Biden is successful, as he appears to be, in preventing a regional war, which is what Hamas wanted, you can discern from the reporting, then he will have made a great accomplishment, especially as what I think is going to be the Israeli victory, and what looks like it, is going to lead to an attempt to negotiate a two-state solution. Whether or not that succeeds is a discussion for another year, literally. But that process, which Biden has endorsed quite strongly, publicly and privately, looks to be getting ready to go out of the gate once the hostilities stop. And then finally, the summit with China, and I mentioned this to Jay, was apparently a success for both sides. The idea that we are restoring a regular military dialogue, that the Chinese will crack down on the precursors to the deadly drug fentanyl, and third, that there will be common ground on the greatest threat to mankind, namely climate change, is a win for everybody. And it does not mitigate the fact that China is our adversary and that we are theirs, as both sides perceive. It just puts a floor under that and starts building a framework in which possibly all the issues that royal Chinese-American relations might be discussed in a practical and hopefully profitable manner. Doesn't end the adversarial relationship as many have charged. It's not a sellout. None of that's true. I think on those three grounds, you'll see that Biden will be, if he continues to be successful, will use that. And it will be done to impress voters with his ability, experience, maturity and judgment, and so on, in opposition to any of the likely Republican candidates who don't have the foreign policy experience for the most part, except for Ambassador Haley. I think you don't see I don't think anybody's ever accused Donald Trump of maturity and judgment. I may be wrong about that, but it's hard to see it in an objective way, let alone in a subjective way. So foreign policy will be used as a crutch, as a weapon for Biden's re-election campaign. Failure, on the other hand, will discredit Biden's administration, because for the reasons we just discussed. So, therefore, foreign policy will play a major role, and it will also leak into, if you like, the discussion about whether or not Biden's age is a problem. Because if he fails, it will be a sign that he doesn't have the stamina and judgment and capability to preside over all this anymore, and that somebody else, whoever that comes in. Now, the crises out there are great. I mentioned all the Russian issues that are out there: arms control, hostages, Ukraine, and so on. The Middle East, you see, we all know what those issues are now. And with China, the agenda of Sino-American differences is exposed. So very quickly.
So our one more speaker joining, and I will ask you meanwhile the discussion also to ask to or introduce our speakers or to.
Sure.
Okay.
So, let me just finish, because there are other major threats that link into this. For example, a major threat that I don't think gets enough discussion, because the Biden administration has really frozen the discussion on this, is the threat that is now emerging from North Korea with its nuclear arsenal. This morning it was reported they're now testing solid fuel weapons, which means another step forward in their capabilities. Kim Jong-un wants an alliance with Russia and presumably China as well, because if Russia and North Korea are allied, China will not be able to stay out of it. I'm talking about a formal alliance, a plan, document, all the things that political scientists talk about. This is another major issue, and this could explode with repercussions all over the world in different directions. The issue is not just a war that could go nuclear in Northeast Asia. The other threats are proliferation. We know North Korea has proliferated to Iran. They were proliferating in Syria. North Korean weapons got to Hamas. You know that from reports, from Israeli intelligence and after action reports in Israel about this. So proliferation, which is a threat to everybody, it is a potential major issue as well. The failure to, I think, supply Ukraine with enough weaponry, of the kind that Ukraine needs, means that this war is going to go on for next year, and has encouraged Putin to remain adamant in the hope that Trump or somebody like him wins, and that the Americans and the Europeans, who he believes to be defeated, decadent, possibly sexually perverse, given Russian propaganda, will get tired of supporting Ukraine and give it to him. That's an enormous agenda for the next president, whoever it is, in foreign affairs. But if we are insolvent, as we were with Iraq and Afghanistan, which again, as I started saying, were bipartisan failures. That means the Bush, the Obama administration, and many would believe Biden because of the way the Afghan retreat was carried out. I don't, in this case, subscribe to that, but it certainly reflects badly on Obama and on Bush before that. So if that argument about insolvency, which I just quoted to you from Walter Lippmann, has legs, then the next election will be indeed a major turning point in American foreign policy. Thank you.
Eli, you're there?
Hi, everyone. Sorry for not being in Washington. I'm in Madrid tonight. But
Eli, I just wanted to make sure you're still there. Eli is our resident expert on Europe. All things European, particularly the European Union. So Eli, I would just like to give you the floor for a second and ask you to add to what Stephen had to say about what you see as the dynamics on your side of the pond.
yes, indeed. There is a lot of polarization in Europe as well. We can see it in recent elections in Finland, where like a far-right party like Finns had its part as a coalition government, and that party is also linked to a racism scandal, by the way. And and these kind of far-right parties are becoming more frequent, and there are fears that elections in France later on, etc., so they could even produce more of such outcomes. But what we see in general, I'd like to point out a bit to the role of disinformation in polarizing societies, and especially in election campaigns in countries like Poland. And as rightly mentioned by Stephen, it is a big problem as well in Europe, the foreign influence and Russian disinformation campaigns. This could be felt especially in Poland. For instance, fake messages were circulating saying that the ruling party, Law and Justice, the former ruling party, would offer free pension to people, like free funerals to pensioners, and these kind of fake news were really circulating. Because Poland is a more anti-Russian country, like especially right now with the Ukraine war, we could say, the disinformation was more to divide the society on vulnerabilities, such as, so there was a more anti-EU rhetoric or anti-immigration rhetoric, but there were also like a lot of disinformation going on about not my war, for instance, like to basically make Russian interests first in Polish elections. So these kind of things are obviously worrying for democracies in Europe. And we could see European Commissioner Jourova complaining about, even like warning about mass manipulation campaigns even before the European elections this year. And Russia obviously has a big part to play in this with troll networks, especially, and right now, I mean, the AI becoming more important in these kind of disinformation campaigns with persona bots or deep fakes. And right now, other platforms being used like Telegram or TikTok, which are less regulated, so to say. We could see similar trends in Slovakia in the recent elections there. There was a big pro-Russian propaganda, especially a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric and lies about Ukraine war. There was, there was a lot of Fico, the president who got elected, is a populist, and he's a pro-Russian populist, and he used a lot of Putin rhetoric to basically twist the facts about Russia-Ukraine war. So he was pretending that the war was started in 2014 by, I quote, Ukrainian Nazis, and saying that they were like basically, the Donbass and Luhansk regions, they were not historically Ukrainian. And this kind of false information was going on and like repeated by the right now Prime Minister of Slovakia. So these are really dangerous trends, as you can see in Hungary as well. And even the Slovak National Party, Andrej Danko, was referring to similar claims that the occupied territories were not historically Ukrainian, etc. And right now, the Slovak president, who got recently elected, Fico, is saying that he's going to stop military aid to Ukraine, and he wants to basically negotiate a peace deal. Same rhetoric as Trump, I would say, because like a peace deal is obviously not to the best interest of Ukraine or neither of the European countries themselves, and it would probably not please Ukrainian people who are fighting for democracy, they wouldn't be able, like they wouldn't be willing to give up any territories for the sake of a like hasty peace deal like that, which is right now, kind of talked in a country like Slovakia, which used to be the strongest ally of Ukraine in the beginning of the war, and they used to be very open to refugees, etc. So we can see big shifts, and this is partly due to Russian influence and propaganda, I would say. And right now, like people in countries like Slovakia, they are losing trust in politicians. And 51 of them, actually, like more than half of them right now, believe that Ukraine was the reason for the Russian invasion. So this kind of false information is unfortunately everywhere. And we could also see it in Greek elections, in the recent Greek elections themselves. And they had actually employed professional disinformation teams, which were paid like to create fake profiles. That was called Team Jorge. They were based in Israel. So that was a big scandal. And in a country like Greece, for instance, trust in media is very low. The corruption perception is very high. So it is dangerous to play with such conspiracy theories. But we can see that like parties like Golden Dawn, like far-right parties are using these conspiracy theories, and they have absurd claims, like they're talking badly about immigrants or immigration rights, children's rights. So there is a very negative rhetoric, I would say, especially in elections campaigns in Europe. But right now, the newly elected Prime Minister Mitsotakis himself, he also used fake videos, it seems, to which is out of context, etc., to saying that like the train accident, for instance, was exploited by the relatives of the victims in lawsuits. Or he also claimed that in his term, temporary workers did not increase, which were false claims. So we can use that. A lot of leaders don't actually hesitate to lie in their election campaigns, and that's kind of has a green light. And this is very worrying, especially like foreign influence has a big role to play in all these elections campaigns here. And actually, there's also this belief that Russia and China usually test the disinformation operations they have on smaller countries. So we can see these election campaigns as a pre-preparation for the US elections. So I wouldn't be surprised to see similar disinformation campaigns in the upcoming US elections as well. So if you have, for the time being, that's...
Eli, I want to come back to you on that point, but Peter has joined us.
Thank you, Dave.
Peter, by the way, if there's anything you want to know about defense, military readiness, military deterrence, nuclear weapons, arms control, you got it.
Thank you,
And we
Dave.
also have another one Zoom also, Dina online already.
He's online?
Yeah, she's
Okay.
already joined.
I want to thank the people that organized this, and my dear friend, Dr. Blank, is the person I usually introduce to speak at my events. So I feel privileged to come and speak right after him. He is, I think, the nation's premier expert on Russian strategy and Russian history, and certainly with our friend Mark Schneider about what they're doing with their nuclear stuff. Back in 1991, I was hosting a breakfast here with Senator Sam Nunn, one of about 1,500 seminars that I've done since 1981. And I said, the Cold War is over, supposedly. It's the end of history. I don't believe it, and I don't think you do either, Senator. And I said, should I continue to talk about what I call the Brothers Mayhem? North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. And all during the 1990s, I had Dr. Blank, among others, people from the agency, CIA, talk about These four countries are going to be united against us. It's just a matter of time for Russia to recover. And Senator Nunn said, yes, continue your seminars, and I'll continue speaking as well, because the Cold War is over, but history is not. What's the common denominator between the violence we see in the world, whether the Middle East or Ukraine or in the Western Pacific, and what you see going on? Let's just take America. Just what's going on in our random violence in our streets. The 624 violent riots in the year 2020 that involved arson, destruction of property, assaulting police officers. 35 people died. And Victor Davis Hanson says $2.5 billion worth of damages. The key is you have to get on the list of the oppressed. Take North Korea. Everything they say, America's hostile policy made me do it. It's like when you were a child and your mother caught you with your hands in the cookie jar. What did you say? Well, it's convenient if you had a brother or sister. Tommy made me do it. This is the same thing with respect to, you have children on TikTok today reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America explaining why he attacked us on 9/11. And Osama bin Laden was said, you made me do it because you allied yourself with the apostate Muslims, the Saudi royal family. And it is the same thing. Iran, for years since they came into power in '79, have said that what they call the great arrogance, which is what they call the United States. How dare you set the rules? Well, the rules were not just set by the United States, they were set by the winning powers at the end of World War II, without which we would descend back into what we had between World War I and World War II, was 94 million people dead, mainly on the European and Asian areas because of the wars. And then, of course, Russia is always aggrieved. As Dr. Blank has pointed out, they are always of the view that everybody around them or near them or wherever we are hostile to them and want to take them down. And so they justify their murder and kidnapping of children, bombing hospitals and schools. Russia, Iran, North Korea, China are exactly the same. Look at China. Here's a country that harvests the organs of the fallen gone and sells them internationally in a multi-billion-dollar business. This is a country that steals. When I did a seminar with the head of the National Security Agency in January 2009, was just after the inauguration of President Obama, I asked General Alexander, I said, he had note cards. He was talking about the theft of intellectual property from China. He said it's $600 billion a year. A year. Who was my audience? I had 44 chief executives and presidents or senior vice presidents of the largest 41 aerospace companies in America. You could see their faces turn white as he said that over a dinner. They didn't even know it, that they were being, that this amount of money was being stolen. That's the seed corn of productivity, which raises your salaries when you're working for a company. China was stealing that. In a sense, what they were doing was stealing income and salaries from Americans by the millions to the tune, and they're still doing it. There's no, they want an international order that allows them to do that. And then you saw a long article was in the Wall Street Journal about they are producing fentanyl in China, not by the triads in some cave somewhere, but in big factories. And the fentanyl is then shipped by airplane or ship to Mexico, where the Mexican government, wink, wink, at the cartels that get the fentanyl and then put it on the drugs and bring it here to America. And how many Americans died of opiate addiction and overdoses last year? 109,000. Every year, more Americans die from drug abuse supplied by the Chinese and the Mexican cartels than the American soldiers that died in the entire Korean and Vietnamese wars combined. So every year we're doing another Vietnam and another Korea war, every year. And you ask yourself, do you want an international order that says that's okay? Because that's what, when Iran says we're the great arrogance, when Russia campaigns against the unipolar world, where China says that what we do inside China is our business, And there's can't be he goes after the United Nations. And these banana heads give him a standing ovation in San Francisco. I've always said that these 4 countries are criminal organizations that masquerade as countries. They get diplomatic immunity, they go to the UN, they got flags, and they got palaces and all the rest of it, but they're criminal organizations. The IRGC and Iran, that's what they are. The fact that the thing is, 2 of them are major oil producers, and one is the biggest oil consumer. And what are they doing? I think it is basically 11 days, they're building a 300 megawatt coal-fired plant. Greenhouse gases are 52 billion tons of greenhouse gases a year are emitted in the world. We emit 5. We're down from 6. Europe emits 5. They're down from 6. China. India pre-COVID was 3 billion tons. It's pretty amazing how little energy they use at 1.4 billion people, going to 1.7 to 1.8 billion people. But India now is around about 5. So India and China together, particularly, are the 2 biggest coal producers in the world. China has planned and under construction, enough coal-fired plants to equal all the coal-fired plants in the United States of America. Currently under construction, and we had this lunacy out in California where the president, the head of China, says, "Oh yeah, we're committed to doing something about global warming." Really? You're going to go from 18 billion tons of greenhouse gases? My estimate is at least 30. How are you going to go to 30? And India is going to similarly go that, because India is a country that has energy poverty. They can't stay that way and take care of the people. They have got to, it's either gas or coal or nuclear or some combination of the 3. There's no way you can reduce greenhouse gases from 53 billion tons to the required 25 billion tons to stop supposedly the temperature increases. Although it is all bogus, don't get me wrong, it is the biggest fairy tale in the history of the world. I know. I worked at the UN Environment Program when I was in college, graduate school and law school at Columbia University. My boss was Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong was former head of Petro-Canada, largest petroleum company in Canada. He became head of the United Nations Environment Program. He started the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and he wanted to make UNEP the central fulcrum in the United Nations to control the world's economies. Then he went to work for Kofi Annan for his Millennium Project. He started the IPCC, and this idea, combined with the concern about global warming, it is to control the economies of the world and the energy production. And God love him, he's passed on. But Maurice was convinced that this was a way with Klaus Fuchs and the World Economic Forum to completely control your lives. When California State is saying to you, the utility can go into your home by electronics and find out that you're using an appliance that's going to use too much energy, we're going to shut it off. You know who stopped it? The environmental left in California said that's an invasion of your privacy. And they joined with the right-wingers who said this is crazy and stopped it. But Newsom wants to do that. You have a gizmo in your car, I don't know if you know this, that tells EPA how many miles you've driven. You're going to have soon, you're going to get a quota. It's called your greenhouse gas quota. You can't produce more than X number of greenhouse gases. There are 18 states in America that have 3 pledges. No internal combustion engines by 2035, no production of meat, no cows, and no dairy. Why? Greenhouse gases. For the animals, this is really a riot. As someone who worked at the UN and did a lot of development work, Bill Gates wants us to eat veggie burgers. He's buying up all this agricultural land so they can make it in a lab and give us this crap. And they can sell it to Bangladesh and the Sudan, Mexico, and the United States, and we don't have to change a thing. The worldwide supermarket. But my problem is, if you don't have draft animals, what don't you have in the third world? Horsepower. They don't have tractors in a lot of the third world. So which of the 3.5 billion people in the world are you going to decide to die? Because they will not be able to plow the land and raise the food that feeds them, because most food in the world is grown locally. It doesn't go in international commerce. The big thing in international commerce is grain, wheat, which is why Ukraine is such a problem, because the Russians have deliberately interdicted the grain shipments out of the Black Sea in order to cause hunger around the world, to get people to not help Ukraine. That is, there's no international system of rules that you want to live under that will say, yes, Mr. Putin, you can do that. But he rants and raves about the unipolar world, and he wants his own rules. No, I don't want these criminals. It's like the mafia complaining about their laws against prostitution and selling drugs and loan sharking. And wouldn't it be nice if all those laws just went away so the mafia could do their enterprises above board and no one would complain? That's what Putin, Xi Jinping, Fat Boy Kim #3, as the Chinese call the North Korean dictator, and the mullahs in Iran, that's what they want. They want our sanctioned, yes, you can act as a criminal enterprise and no one's going to say anything. And if you look in this country, when you see people going up to a cop car and shooting into it at point blank range, and you see someone holding up an Israeli flag in San Francisco or Los Angeles, and some guy, a professor at a local university, comes up with a metal pole and whacks him over the head, and he's been arrested now for involuntary manslaughter. That's civilization breaking down, and as it's broken down internationally and broken down nationally, there's one other thing. The biggest thing, and Steve understands this, the whole point of, you've heard of escalate to win. I'm going to threaten the use of nuclear weapons in a conventional conflict in order to get you to back down and simply not join the fight. That is the ultimate end of civilization, because when you and I have always talked about deterrence, and I work for the National Institute of Deterrence Study, deterrence in your mind is, I'm going to stop bad guys from doing bad things to good people. They also do bad things to their own people, but those people aren't bad. They have no control over what goes on. What Putin has done, and Xi Jinping and North Korea and Iran is, and the Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States, that just came out with a report in October. 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, unanimous, said the collective use of nuclear weapons is the most serious threat we now face in the nuclear business. This is what escalate to win is. They flip the chart. Instead of using deterrence to stop aggression, they want to use nuclear weapons to commit aggression and get away with it by forcing us to stand down. Okay? That's what Osama bin Laden did with respect to 9/11. It was to get us to stand down in the Middle East, because he said, I'll come do it again. That's the same thing of what happened in Cobra Towers, the embassies in Africa, the World Trade Center bombing in 1993 was a message just to get us to stand down. That's the international order they want, which is we stay out and they commit whatever crimes they want. Because all those criminal acts I've talked about, all those terror acts, were totally criminal. They're against every standard of civilization, and yet we have these people denigrating and trashing Western civilization, without which we would be back in Nazi Germany types, would be worldwide. And as someone whose grandparents fled Nazi Germany and got the hell, we got out the day Hitler came to power. My grandfather had the brains to know that if he comes to power, I made arrangements to get out of here. Okay? And that's what we're facing in Ukraine, and what are going on with Hamas and Israel, and what's going on with China, wherever they go. It's just the exact same thing in all 3 areas. It's trashing civilization, what the professor called defining deviancy down. We're now defining civilization to the point where it doesn't even exist. And these China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, this is seriously talked about and written about in the New York Times as if they have an international order we should really pay attention to and thoughtful that they're criminal organizations, and that's what they are and have been since their founding.
Before we get to a point where we have to stop. Dina, are you with us?
Yes.
Yes, Dina,
I'm sorry.
Oh. Hello.
hi,
Hi, everyone. Sorry, do you hear me?
nice, yes, we hear you. You're from
Okay.
Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan, right?
Oh, yes, it's Kazakhstan. It's 3:28 a.m. in here. So,
All right, for
but
those
thank you
of
so
you
much.
who do not know, speaking of China and Russia, this is a country that borders both. And
Oh, yeah.
so, why don't you give us what the world looks like from where you are?
Well, actually, I was supposed to talk about the elections, but if you want to talk about like Kazakhstan's position right now, I can talk about it as well. Like, of course, like I mean, I understand what foreign media is saying, that like Kazakhstan is trying to counterbalance the Russian influence in Central Asia, blah blah blah, and fostering sovereignty, independence, and democratic values within the region. However, we should not forget that like 80% of our oil that constitutes about like 50% of our GDP is transported via the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, and it traverses Russian territory, like it goes through Novosibirsk. And consequently, like if Russia decides to shut down this pipeline, and it happened like 4 times in 2022, under questionable like technical pretext, Kazakhstan would face significant economic repercussions, and we had them in 2022. Of course, like Kazakhstan, like right now, they are like negotiating with Azerbaijan, like and talking about this middle corridor via Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan pipeline. Right, I mean it's Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and then to Turkey. However, the annual projections amount to mere like 1.5 million tons, and if we compare to 54 million tons transported via the CPC that goes through Russia, we understand that, like, of course, strategically, this Caspian Pipeline Consortium is more important to us. And right now, Kazakhstan plans to increase oil exports this year to 83 million tons. So that's why Kazakhstan sees CPC as the primary driver of our economy. So in addition to these oil dependencies, also like Russia was, I mean, like I don't really know like right now, but it was the source of 85% of our imported arms and supplies. And also it supplied like 40% of our food and clothing needs. For instance, in the spring of 2022, there was like unilateral halt to Russian sugar imports. Like, of course, it's clearly violated Eurasian Economic Union agreement with Russia, but it triggered a sugar crisis in Kazakhstan. So if before like 2014, we imported sugar from Eastern Europe mostly, like in other different countries, so it was diversified. After 2014, we started importing sugar from Russia exclusively, and other goods as well. Also, like right now, our agricultural sector is under threat from Russia's encroachment, because they are like expanding, and like our traditional wheat markets in Central Asia and Afghanistan. They have pushed for tariff unification through this Eurasian Economic Union. And this policy and this bill was actually ratified by our parliament this year. So it means that by 2025, our agricultural sector would lose our primary markets, because like they're gonna transport the wheats to Central Asia, like especially Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, with low prices, and we cannot compete with these prices, because like Russia has lots of wheat and we don't. Also, what else, like when we're talking about this dependency, because like why am I talking about this? Because like everyone is like, oh, Kazakhstan is fighting, blah blah blah, and they're talking about like how Tokayev says something to Putin. However, if we take a look at the economic, like at the figures, we can see how dependent we are on Russia. Also, we I don't know what else to add, because like I was actually I thought that I would be talking about the elections. However, if we're talking about like our view, like from Kazakhstan, what's going on with Russia and China, so this is basically it, right? And also, of course, the present issue right now that we all discuss here in Kazakhstan is regulation of customs duties. Like since we are in this Eurasian Customs Union, Kazakhstan pays like 85% to Russia and about 5% to Belarus. So like we like how they it is still unclear how they calculated this regulations on customs duties, because like if before like the significant like transit it was through Russian territory. However, right now it's not, and we still continue paying like 85% to Russia, I mean in customs duties, and 5% to Belarus, which is crazy. So yes, like right now I understand that we are like deeply dependent on Russia, and Russian markets, they invade in our market. And maybe you heard that ArcelorMittal, they left our market, and right now there are like the rumor has it that Russian companies like Severstal is going to take over. So as we can see, Russian Kazakhstani dependence on Russia just increases month by month, and what we see in American media, in European media, it's not true if we talk about like figures and numbers and economic dependence of Kazakhstan on Russia.
Well, thank you for the briefing. I hate to cut this short, but I'm gonna get skinned if I don't. So we were gonna have more panels, but I'm kind of obligated at this point to say it's time to move on to the next panel. I hope you all learned something from our panelists. I'm leaving today knowing things that I did not know when I got here.